Hi, welcome to Pretty Blunt. I am your host, Jamie Lipowitz. I am joined today, as always, with my head of community at High Buds Club, Sabine Schwirtz. Sabine, what's the hot gossip?
Okay, well, the hot gossip is that we had 360 people live on Monday night, and that is truly a crazy win.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty incredible, the OCS PK Sesh, because it was the first of its kind. We've never done a sesh like that before with a government body. We've never had multiple partner brands on a sesh, so that's new and interesting in many ways. Yeah, it was just a win across the board and definitely a check mark of a lot of firsts. So it was pretty epic.
Obviously, we feel great, and there's a lot of exciting things, but we've learned a lot in the past year, and to kind of get to this space.
What I've learned in this journey is that brand storytelling is the way that budtenders can sell products and the way that brands can be sticky in budtenders' minds as a reason to sell them and a willingness to sell them. And that is something that takes time to build, and not many brands have put in that time investment to generate those stories and really win with budtenders and win their mind share.
Actually, I've never thought about the time investment in that way. You talk all the time about how brands take Coca-Cola 100 years, but it's like you actually need the time for the stories to happen so then you can tell the story. That's almost it. You can't make the story up from nothing. Truly, the stories have to come from you just experiencing the brand over time and doing things and working through problems and solving things.
A lot of that stuff, a lot of those stories are evergreen, right? Like they matter in the early stages of the brand, but they also matter in the later stages of the brand as the brand evolves, as a foundation for who they are and why they exist. And I don't think many LPs have put a lot of thought into why their brands exist and who they're for. And that is the piece that is missing a lot of the time. So the product might fit a perceived market need. They see white space, the data tells them that this product doesn't exist and could possibly work, but they haven't done any of the work to properly commercialize it and figure out what the brand story is and why it exists and who it's solving for. And that's the work that I think happens over time and iterates until you're concise. And I think, 6 years in, we're seeing the brands who have put in the time and have developed these materials.
My hot gossip when it comes to brand storytelling is that I literally don't want to hear anything about your product in your brand storytelling. Truly, in your brand storytelling blurb that you give me, I don't care about your next drop when I'm learning about your brand story. I want to know, why did you start the company? Did you invent something, and how and why? What are your values? So that you say no to certain things that are coming down the product line and say yes to certain things. And that's really it. So that eventually I can just trust that brand. Anything you bring out, I know, there's 3 things I can rattle off right away about it because it's all connected to the same brand.
I mean, I love the Jeter story because it's real. Like it is authentic, 4 dudes, entertainment party background, striving to build the number one pre-roll in the world. I think that's a great story. In other worlds outside of cannabis, I'm obsessed with midday squares. I think Jake Carls has done, and his team has done an incredible job at bringing their consumers along their journey and telling their story and bringing them into the fold and sharing. And people root for you when they want to support you when they feel like they know you and they feel like they have access to you or a piece of you in some way. And that's why I think authenticity is the thing that is the most valuable, yet so few can put out something that is genuinely authentic.
Well, I think that that's an interesting point too, because we've talked a lot about how people need to be specific about who their customer is and who their client is. And it is about being authentic because you're not going to be able to be authentic for one specific type of customer if you're not trying to meet a specific need. And so being authentic is understanding who you are for, but also who you're not for.
I think a lot of brands want to be for everybody. They think every stoner or everyone who eats an edible or every beverage consumer, great. But there's many reasons why it would or would not be for somebody. So if you have a super sugary beverage, well, you're probably not for the very athletic, health conscious consumer, right? Like, that's just the reality. So understanding who you are for and who you are not for helps you whittle down the story. Who are you for? Why do you exist? Why should I care about you? And if I should care about you, you've given me something to believe in. I now have a reason to trust you or try you or recommend you.
And I think that that's it, is like someone has to feel familiar with you, and like familiar in a family way almost. They actually need to feel a connection to your brand because you are an authentic being. You almost do need to have a brand characterization of what that person looks like, not a customer base. Like your brand could be represented as a specific individual in a certain way.
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons like influencer led product brands crush, like Mr. Beast and Feastables or, Jake Paul and Prime or Alex Cooper's doing Unwell Water now. And there's lots of examples of creator led brands that absolutely dominate traditional brands. And it's because the customers feel like they know them, they want to support them, and they take them through the journey on their platforms of either building these products and these brands and giving them sneak peeks and introductions and all of these things. But they give them reasons to believe and reasons to tune in and then ultimately support them with their wallets. And, I'm guilty of it. There's been some influencer products where I'm like, yeah, I'm buying that. For sure, I'm buying that. And it goes across the board. Everything from water to Kim Kardashian and Skims. It's no different in cannabis, but I think we have different boundaries to play within. And a lot of the products are just that, they're products. There's no real brand to buy into. And a lot of the brands haven't figured out how to storytell, how to get budtenders excited about them, as well as consumers. And budtenders are a different audience than consumers, and they need the same things, just positioned slightly different. But if you haven't done the thinking or you haven't put in the time investment to figure out what those things are, you can't deliver the storytelling.
Well, and so going back to the influencer thing and going back to money about both of those things, because I think the hesitation sometimes is, yes, we have to play within this sandbox. So of like the marketing regulations. So I think someone might hear this and be like, well, I can't be an influencer led brand. Like we're not allowed to have a character representation. And it's like, absolutely, you're not allowed to do that. I'm not suggesting that like everyone is a person led brand in cannabis. But what we are saying is that there's these elements of storytelling where I'm bought in to that person without knowing anything about what they're selling. And so it's really about like how, again, your brand is building that trust, not about you being a celebrity driven brand. And then also with the money, like we've heard that a few times, and you were talking about it a little bit earlier with larger brands. It's like, it isn't about how much money you throw at the wall to build the brand. You could have almost no money and still build me a really incredible, successful brand.
But I'm gonna say though, the thing that annoys me a lot in this industry is everybody falls on the marketing regulations as the excuse as to why they can't market and build their brands, but then they don't do the simple things well. So like, sure, there's lots of regulations, absolutely. But where you do have liberty in your trade communications. You have liberty in providing stores excellent content and product shots. You have the ability to deliver all these various marketing assets, and you don't do the simple things well and then complain you can't do all the extra things. It's challenging because if you did the simple things well, you would then have a different vantage point to see where you can get around the marketing regulations. But they use having these strict regulations as the blanket reason why they can't market and be successful.
What would you say are like one or two of the simple things that need to be done well that you would start with if you were building a cannabis brand?
Why does your brand exist? And then what problem are you solving?
I think that's it. It's not always about the customer, it's about what problem you're solving.
I think every great business solves a problem across the board universally. So what problem are you solving for your chosen customer? Oh, why do you exist? I see it even in our own business, how as soon as I started giving the industry a perspective into me as the founder and why High Buds Club exists and my point of view on things that's separate from my brand, I started seeing the halo effect of that, of my chosen customer, coming into my funnel and wanting to work with us. And so there is that element that that I have experienced firsthand where, yes, you have your brand message, but then who are the stewards of your brand story and how do you draw attention to it? The reps are meant to be the stewards of as brand ambassadors, right? To get the Budtenders excited, do pop-ups, get customers excited. Like they are that inflection point for a brand connecting to the world right now. And if they're not trained properly or they don't have the right tools, it becomes hard. But if you show up authentically and you know what you're saying and why you're saying it and what message you want to get across and what problem you're solving, I think a lot of brands would be far more successful long term.
Just to think about it as the problem that you're solving. Everyone just wants to have less problems in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you don't know what problem you're solving for your customer, why are you talking to them? The whole point of a conversation in a sales environment is to figure out what problem your customer has and then what solution can you give them to solve that problem. So if you're a sales rep, it's not about shoving your 3.5 gram jar of flour down their throat if that's not what they need. If the thing that they need and there's a gap is their forms, as an example. If you're a brand trying to win budtender mindshare, well, what problem are you solving for them? The budtender, the good ones, want to be subject matter experts. They want to give their customers the right products. So how do you teach them? How do you solve that problem for them? By teaching them why your product solves a problem for their customer. And if you can properly articulate that and reposition it based on every conversation you're going in, still the same message, it's just slightly different, you win.
No, 100%.
Cooked, you win. But that's the thing. I don't think a lot of people know the problem they're solving. I don't think they know why they exist. I don't think they understand why they're positioned in the market the way they are. And so if that work hasn't been done from the top down, it's never going to trickle into the market in a way that's effective.
I think the difference is problem solving versus opportunity seeking. I think you're very good at like, there's a problem here, I have to solve it, versus I think a lot of brands are opportunity seeking. They're like, there's 30% of a margin available in this category, which is very different, right?
Yeah, I'd absolutely 100% agree with that. I think that's just also based on how humans are wired. I see it in hiring, right? I've seen the folks who want to come and bring value and really that's important versus the folks who are trading an hour of their time for a dollar amount because that's the opportunity at their disposal. And so I think that's across the board. But that's why I think the authenticity piece of the puzzle is why you always win. Because if you're authentic in why you're doing it and you see a problem and you want to solve it, or it's a personal passion, like I think Sam from You Feel You has an incredible story. It's a real passion point of his in the minor cannabinoid space to, bring these products to life in the way he's bringing them to life. And that's why I think he's a very small operation that's crushing much bigger, more well-funded teams because it's coming from a real place. And I think opportunity is one thing, but when something drives you and you feel passionate about it and it's your contribution to the world, I think you just get a better product.
Going back to Sam, because I think Sam is a really interesting example in so many ways. Obviously, we love Sam because Sam's team does something a lot of other teams don't do is they do focus on budtender communicated education. Like, yes, there's always an external B2C audience to communicate to, but the You Feel You team and the High Feel You team, all they do is how to sell our products. How can you best sell our products?
Yeah, because Sam understands what's important.
Exactly.
I think a lot of LPs overcomplicate it. I think we're at a stage of the market. I can think of off the top of my head a few small operators who are going to lap the big guys because they've put in the sweat equity of doing the simple things well.
Simple things well consistently
It
to
wasn't
build
built in a
something.
day, right? Like, but it was worked on every day. So I can see just the time investment that has the market requires. And that's the thing about brand. Can't buy it. You have to live it. You have to invest in it over and over and over again. Because you're what you're telling the market you are and what they can expect from you. And over time, there's trust built. And then it's like, yeah, no brainer. Of course I'm buying. Oh, it's that brand? Yeah, I'll buy that.
It's like my mom and dad only bought Toyotas for years. You fall into that brand and you're like, great, I know I'm not even gonna look anywhere else because I trust everything that they produce.
I do think there's nuances in the cannabis CPG landscape. I think flower is an exception to a few rules. I think flower requires a different positioning and a different angling, and I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sold yet that brand is going to mean the same thing in whole flower sales. I'm not saying it does or it does not. I can see that there's nuance there, but finished products without a doubt. Vapes, edibles, beverages, pre-rolls, infused pre-rolls, finished goods, absolutely. CPG rules apply.
I had a thought the other day about tomatoes and ketchup related to cannabis. And I think you just kind of clarified it because, right, flour does function a lot of the times like a regular grocery store agriculture item. Like I'm looking at the best tomato when I'm buying it, and I'm not necessarily like choosing the brand of tomato, but I am choosing my brand of ketchup. That is very different because then I have to go to a shelf. It's a pre-made good. So yeah, it's very interesting to think of it that way as like flour might actually kind of sit kind of outside of CPG in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think these new packages with windows and the ability to kind of like squeeze the product and see it in its own way, very interesting. I think changes a lot of that because I do think certain customers, not all customers, but certain customers will say, bring me 4 bags. I want to pick one. It's going to require a little bit more attention. We don't have the same, like, I can't remember, deli style, I think they call it in the US. We don't have the deli style opportunity of purchasing flour. So I think this is going to change things slightly. But yeah, I think, you know what, though? Also, I will say just another thought I had. I do think there is a world where the growers become brands. And that's the way, flower brands are going to be built. And it's going to be around hero strains and storytelling around why they grew this thing specifically. I think there's a couple brands that do a really good job of flower storytelling. So I might change my answer on flower, but I do think it's slightly nuanced in ways to finish goods.
Yeah, no, I absolutely completely agree with that. Okay, one of the other things that I would love us to chat about, the future of education. Truly what this taught me and seeing everything come together is exactly that the audience matters. The pre-rolls team came together literally with like that 30 gram example where they were like, here's how you sell a pre-roll to someone and be like, oh, here's the pre-roll to add on to make yourself hit your 30-gram limit. And that's exactly what we've been doing. And what we're doing continuing moving forward is like, it is about catering our messaging just to the budtender as a whole. And so like, how are they upselling goods all the time? Do they understand what a selling cycle is? Do they understand what an upsell is versus an add-on? Those are different, and why you would do those different things.
Well, I think it's retail fundamentals. There isn't a single source, like a single source of truth in the industry that delivers this kind of material. And, that's, I think, a huge opportunity for us as the, leaders in cannabis retail education. We are quite literally building the plane as we fly it. And I think going back to the earlier part of our conversation, I see the problem that we can solve. And I see the ways in which it's required across the board, from the OCS needing it, to the retailers needing it, to the budtenders needing it, to the LPs needing it. And it's a really exciting time because this is a first in the world of this kind of content. It has never existed before. And so I think it's a huge privilege that we get to, create these things and these opportunities. And what a time to be alive.
Yeah. I think you and I have such an interesting perspective because we see everybody and we see what the Budtenders talk about every day.
I mean, yeah, we sit at a really interesting vantage point for sure. We don't compete with brands. We don't compete with retailers. The budtenders tell us what they're learning in their stores and what their gaps are. And then we just see so many things holistically from various vantage points that I think we have a perspective of the industry that, quite frankly, no one else does.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Real sorry. You said it. I think I think we can wrap this bad boy up, Jamie.
Let's do it. Great chat. Excited for what's to come.
Just like honestly, the OCS program was a win for us, a win for the industry. I will say it one last time. It's a universe first. It is.
One down, two to go.
Two to go. Bigger and better as always.
Yeah. 400.
Maybe we'll get. So I was like, maybe we'll get 400. Ah, scary. Okay, great.
Bye.
See you next time.